When 6-month-old Pumpkin, a fluffy orange Maine Coon, vanished into a Michigan snowstorm, the Daniels family feared the worst. For 3 agonizing days, they searched through knee-deep snow as temperatures plummeted to 15 degrees. Just as hope began to fade, they heard a faint cry from the dark forest edge. There was Pumpkin, but he wasn't alone. Curled protectively against his orange fur was another kitten, one with tufted ears, spotted coat, and paws far too large for any house cat. A Maine Coon and a Bobcat kitten, huddled together beneath a fallen tree, warming one another with their shared body heat. The Daniels family took the young Bobcat in, naming her Fawn for her wide eyes and gentle spirit. From that moment on, Pumpkin and Fawn became inseparable. This is the story of 2 souls who found each other when they needed saving most, and a friendship that would defy the laws of nature itself. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The first snowflakes began falling just after 4 o'clock that November afternoon, dancing through the bare branches of the sugar maples that lined the Daniels property in northern Michigan. From the kitchen window, Jenna Daniels watched the flurries thicken while stirring a pot of beef stew, the warm scent of thyme and rosemary filling the 100-year-old farmhouse. Her husband Tom was splitting firewood out back, the rhythmic thunk of his axe echoing across their 20 acres of woodland. Their 10-year-old daughter Lily sat at the kitchen table, carefully working on her math homework while their orange Maine Coon kitten, Pumpkin, batted at her pencil every time she tried to write. "Mom, Pumpkin's being impossible again." Lily giggled, scooping the 6-month-old kitten into her arms. His fur was impossibly fluffy, like spun copper in the warm kitchen light, and his purr vibrated against her chest like a tiny motor. "Let him outside for a bit," Jenna suggested, glancing at the darkening sky. "But just for a few minutes. This storm's supposed to get worse." Lily carried Pumpkin to the back door, his white-tipped paws dangling comically over her arms. The kitten had come to them just 2 months earlier, a rescue from a shelter in Traverse City. From day one, he'd shown an unusual independence for such a young cat, always exploring, always pushing boundaries, yet somehow always finding his way back to Lily's bed each night. "Just a quick adventure, okay?" Lily told him, setting him on the porch. "Dinner's in an hour." Pumpkin stretched luxuriously, his fluffy tail forming a question mark, then bounded down the steps into the swirling snow. Lily watched him investigate the woodpile where Tom worked, then dart toward the bird feeder, his orange coat a bright splash against the white-dusted ground. An hour later, when Jenna called everyone for dinner, Pumpkin hadn't returned. "He's probably under the porch," Tom said, stomping snow from his boots. "You know how he likes to play hide and seek?" But when Lily checked under the porch with a flashlight, she found only old gardening tools and a family of field mice that scattered at her approach. They checked the garage, the shed, the chicken coop. Tom even climbed into the crawl space above the garage, emerging covered in cobwebs and shaking his head. By 7 o'clock, the snow was falling in thick curtains. The weather report now called for 8 to 10 inches overnight, the first major storm of the season, arriving weeks earlier than usual. Jenna bundled Lily in her warmest coat, and together they walked the perimeter of their property, calling Pumpkin's name into the wind. "Pumpkin! Here, kitty, kitty!" Their voices were swallowed by the storm. The woods that bordered their property, a mix of white pine, oak, and birch that stretched for miles, had become an impenetrable wall of shadows and snow. That first night, Lily barely slept. She sat by her bedroom window, watching the snow pile higher, pressing her small hand against the cold glass as if she could somehow draw Pumpkin home through sheer will. Jenna found her there at dawn, wrapped in her grandmother's quilt, tears dried on her cheeks. "We'll find him, sweetheart," Jenna whispered, though her own heart was heavy with doubt. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees overnight. For a house kitten, even one with Pumpkin's thick coat, the odds weren't good. They searched all the next day. Tom took time off from his job at the lumber mill, and even their neighbors, the Johnsons from the farm to the east and old Mr. Kowalski from across the road, joined the effort. They trudged through knee-deep snow, shaking bags of Pumpkin's favorite treats, leaving out cans of tuna and warm blankets in sheltered spots. "Sometimes cats hole up somewhere safe and wait out the weather," Mr. Kowalski told them, his Polish accent still thick after 40 years in Michigan. "My barn cat once disappeared for 5 days during a blizzard. Found her in the hollow of an old oak tree. Mad as hell, but perfectly fine." But Pumpkin wasn't a barn cat. He was a pampered house kitten who'd never spent a night outside, never hunted for his own food, never faced the harsh reality of a Michigan winter. By the third night, even Tom had stopped saying, "when we find him," and started saying, "if." Lily refused to give up. After dinner, which she barely touched, she pulled on her snow boots and grabbed the big flashlight from the mudroom. "I'm going to look one more time," she announced. "Honey, it's dark, and it's still snowing," Jenna said gently. "Just around the yard. Please, Mom." Tom stood up. "I'll go with her. Just a quick walk around the property line." Father and daughter ventured out into the night. The snow had finally stopped falling, leaving the world muffled and transformed. The beam of their flashlights carved through the darkness, illuminating a landscape that looked nothing like their familiar backyard. Everything was smooth and white and foreign. They were about to turn back when Lily grabbed her father's arm. "Dad, listen." Tom stopped, holding his breath. At first, he heard nothing but the whisper of wind through pine boughs. Then, faint and desperate, came a sound that made his heart leap, a mew. "Pumpkin!" Lily shrieked, plunging toward the tree line. "Lily, wait!" Tom hurried after her, his longer legs struggling to keep up with his daughter's desperate energy. The mewing grew louder as they pushed through the snow-laden branches of young pines. Lily's flashlight beam swept frantically until it landed on a low tangle of fallen branches, creating a natural shelter against a massive oak trunk. "There!" She dropped to her knees, not caring that snow immediately soaked through her pants. "Pumpkin, is that you?" She pulled aside the branches carefully, and her flashlight illuminated a scene that made both father and daughter gasp. There, in a shallow depression lined with pine needles and dead leaves, was Pumpkin. His orange fur was matted and dirty, but his green eyes were bright and alert. He was lying on his side, and curled against his belly, nearly invisible except for 2 enormous tufted ears, was another kitten. But this wasn't just any kitten. "Dad," Lily whispered, "look at its ears and those spots." Tom knelt beside his daughter, his mind trying to process what he was seeing. The kitten pressed against Pumpkin was smaller, maybe 4 weeks old, with a tawny coat marked by distinct dark spots. Its ears were topped with characteristic black tufts, and even in the flashlight's beam, they could see its paws were larger than any house cat's should be. "That's a bobcat," Tom breathed. "That's a baby bobcat." Pumpkin mewed again, but he didn't move. He remained curled protectively around the smaller kitten, which was shivering despite the warmth of Pumpkin's body. The orange kitten looked up at them with what Lily would later describe as pleading eyes, as if to say, "Help us." Tom's mind raced. Protocol would be to call the DNR, let wildlife officials handle this. But looking at the two kittens, one domestic, one wild, huddled together for warmth, he made a different decision. "We're taking them both," he said. He shrugged off his coat and gently wrapped both kittens in it. Pumpkin didn't resist, and the Bobcat kitten was too weak to do more than mew pitifully. As Tom lifted them, he realized the Bobcat kit was dangerously thin beneath its fluffy coat. They hurried back to the house, Lily running ahead to warn her mother. Jenna's expression went from relief to astonishment when Tom unwrapped his bundle on the kitchen floor. "Is that a Bobcat kitten?" "Yes," Tom confirmed. "And before you say anything, look at them." The two kittens were already curling back together on the kitchen rug, Pumpkin grooming the Bobcat's head with gentle licks. The wild kitten was female, they could see now, and despite her species, she seemed to trust Pumpkin completely. "She's dying," Lily said quietly. "Look how skinny she is." Jenna, who'd worked as a veterinary technician before Lily was born, knelt to examine the Bobcat. "She's severely dehydrated and malnourished, maybe 4 weeks old. Mom probably died. Bobcats don't abandon their young unless something happens to them." "Can we save her?" Lily asked. Jenna looked at her daughter's hopeful face, then at the two kittens wrapped around each other on their kitchen floor. "We can try, but we need to call Dr. Martinez at the Wildlife Rehab Center. This has to be done legally." Dr. Elena Martinez arrived within the hour, despite the treacherous roads. She was a small woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she'd been running the Northwoods Wildlife Rehabilitation Center for 20 years. "Well," she said after examining both kittens, "this is a first for me." She confirmed the Bobcat was female, approximately 4 weeks old, and suffering from exposure and starvation. "She wouldn't have survived another night," Dr. Martinez said. "The question is how these two found each other." "Maybe Pumpkin heard her crying?" Lily suggested. "Maybe," the vet said thoughtfully. "Or maybe she followed his scent, looking for warmth. Young bobcats are surprisingly social. In the wild, siblings will huddle together for warmth and comfort. She might have thought Pumpkin was just a very orange sibling." Dr. Martinez made some calls. Given the unusual circumstances and the fact that separating the kittens now might cause additional trauma, she received temporary permission for the Daniels family to foster the Bobcat under her supervision. "She'll need to be bottle-fed every few hours with a special formula," Dr. Martinez explained. "And eventually, she'll need to be relocated to a facility equipped for wildlife rehabilitation. But for now, as long as you're willing." "We're willing," Jenna said immediately, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. They named the Bobcat Fawn for her wide, wondering eyes and delicate features. Over the next weeks, the Daniels house transformed into a makeshift wildlife nursery. Jenna took time off work to handle the round-the-clock feedings. Tom built a large enclosure in their heated garage for when the Bobcat grew bigger. And Lily documented everything with her mother's old camera, creating what would become a visual diary of an impossible friendship. Pumpkin appointed himself Fawn's guardian and teacher. He showed her how to use the litter box, though she learned that on her own with remarkable speed. He taught her the joy of chasing feather toys across the living room floor. He demonstrated the proper technique for batting at dangly things and the best sunny spots for afternoon naps. In return, Fawn brought out something wild in Pumpkin. His play became more elaborate, more athletic. He learned to pounce with a precision that would have made his distant wildcat ancestors proud. Together, They wrestled and tumbled with a joy that made the whole family laugh. The pair slept curled together in a large dog bed Jenna had bought, Pumpkin's fluffy tail invariably draped over Fawn like a blanket. They groomed each other after meals, ate side by side. Though from different dishes, Fawn graduated from bottles to a special carnivore diet and developed an elaborate communication system of chirps, purrs, and mews that seemed to make perfect sense to them. They're bonded, Dr. Martinez observed during one of her weekly visits. I've seen it happen with orphaned wildlife raised together, but never between a domestic and wild animal like this. The story might have remained a private family miracle if Jenna hadn't posted a video on social media. It was a simple clip. Pumpkin and Fawn on the couch, the Bobcat's spotted head resting on Pumpkin's fluffy orange belly, both purring so loudly the phone's microphone crackled. She captioned it, "Our Maine Coon saved a Bobcat kitten during a snowstorm. Now they're inseparable." Within days, the video had millions of views. News crews showed up at their door. The Daniels family found themselves reluctant celebrities, their story featured on morning shows and wildlife programs. Donations poured in for the Wildlife Rehab Center. Children sent drawings of Pumpkin and Fawn. An elderly woman in Florida wrote to say the story had given her hope after losing her husband. But fame was bittersweet, because everyone knew what had to happen eventually. At 6 months old, Fawn had grown into a sleek young bobcat, her spots more pronounced, her paws enormous, her wild nature increasingly evident. She still played gently with Pumpkin, but her strength was becoming dangerous for a house cat, even one as large as a Maine Coon. "It's time, Doctor," Martinez said gently one April morning. "The soft-release sanctuary is ready for her." The sanctuary was only 30 miles away, a 1,000-acre preserve where rehabilitated bobcats learned to hunt and live wild before being fully released. Fawn would have support and food while she transitioned, but she would be free. The goodbye was heart-wrenching. Pumpkin seemed to understand something was happening. He groomed Fawn for an hour straight that morning, paying special attention to her tufted ears. When they loaded her into the carrier, he sat beside it, one paw pressed against the bars. For days after Fawn left, Pumpkin sat by the window watching the tree line. He barely ate. He ignored his toys. Lily often found him in the garage, sitting in the empty enclosure, purring softly to himself. "His heart is broken," she told her mother, tears streaming down her face. "Sometimes love means letting go," Jenna said, holding her daughter close, though she felt the truth of Lily's words. 3 weeks passed. Pumpkin began eating normally again, though he still spent hours by the window. Then, on a crisp May morning, Lily screamed from the kitchen, "Mom, Dad, come quick!" At the edge of the tree line, just where the yard met the forest, sat a young bobcat. She was larger than when she'd left, her coat glossy with health, but unmistakably fawn. Pumpkin was already at the door, mewing urgently. Tom opened it carefully, and the orange cat padded out onto the porch. Fawn didn't approach the house. Her wild instincts were too strong now, but she sat perfectly still as Pumpkin walked slowly toward her. They touched noses through the porch screen, and both began to purr. Fawn stayed for perhaps 10 minutes, allowing Pumpkin to rub against the screen, marking her with his scent. Then, as silently as she'd come, she melted back into the forest. "She came back," Lily whispered. "She came back for him." It became a pattern. Every few weeks, sometimes at dawn, sometimes at dusk, Fawn would appear at the edge of the woods. She never came closer to the house than that first day, but she would sit and wait for Pumpkin. He always seemed to know when she was there, abandoning whatever he was doing to go meet his friend. They would touch noses, purr, sometimes play a gentle game of pat-paws through the screen. Once, Tom saw Fawn leave a dead mouse at the spot where they met. A gift for the orange friend who had saved her life. Dr. Martinez, when told about the visits, was amazed. Bobcats are solitary, territorial animals. For her to maintain this connection, to actively seek him out, it's unprecedented. The visits continued through summer and fall. When winter came again, a year after that fateful snowstorm, the Daniels family wondered if Fawn would disappear into the deep woods to establish her own territory. But on the first snowy morning of December, there she was, sitting in her usual spot, snow gathering on her tufted ears. Pumpkin bounded out to meet her, and they touched noses as always. "Forest bonded," Tom said, watching from the window with his coffee. "That's what they are." The term stuck. The Daniels family began calling them the forest-bonded pair. A house cat and a wild bobcat, connected by a single night of shared warmth and a friendship that transcended the boundaries of wild and tame. Lily, now 11 and wiser for the experience, kept a journal about Pumpkin and Fawn. Her last entry that winter read, "Mom says that some friendships can't be explained, only witnessed. She says Pumpkin and Fawn found each other when they both needed saving. Fawn from the cold, and Pumpkin from being just another house cat. I think maybe they're still saving each other every time they meet." Pumpkin reminds Fawn that she was loved, and Fawn reminds Pumpkin that he's brave. Maybe that's what friendship really is. Seeing the wild in the tame and the gentle in the wild, and loving both parts equally. The story of Pumpkin and Fawn spread far beyond their small Michigan town. Wildlife biologists came to study their interaction. Animal behaviorists wrote papers about interspecies bonding. But for the Daniels family, the magic wasn't in the science. It was in the simple sight of an orange Maine Coon touching noses with a wild bobcat. Two unlikely friends brought together by a storm and held together by something deeper than instinct. Years later, when Lily went off to college to study veterinary medicine, she would tell the story to anyone who would listen. How her orange kitten had disappeared into a blizzard and come back a hero. How sometimes the most profound connections are the ones that shouldn't exist at all. How love doesn't always mean keeping something close. Sometimes it means learning to love across a distance, through seasons and changes, wild and free. And back home in Michigan, on quiet mornings when the mist rose from the forest floor, an aging orange cat would still sit by the window, watching the tree line, waiting for a glimpse of spotted fur and tufted ears. Not every visit brought Fawn anymore. She had a territory to patrol, perhaps cubs of her own now. But when she did appear, Pumpkin would still hurry out to meet her. Two old friends sharing a moment of recognition before returning to their separate worlds. The forest knew their secret. The wind carried their story. And in a world that often seemed divided between wild and tame, dangerous and safe, us and them, Pumpkin and Fawn stood as proof that love recognizes no such boundaries. They were living evidence that sometimes, in the midst of a storm, the most unlikely souls find each other. And that finding, that recognition, that choice to stay and warm another living being, can create a bond that lasts a lifetime. That's the story the Daniels family tells now. When people ask about the photos on their mantle, an orange Maine Coon and a spotted bobcat, touching noses through a screen door, two hearts forever forest bonded, forever friends.